Hello, thank you for joining us for WAFR Bytes episode 4. Today we're going to be talking about a favourite topic of a lot of people, cost optimization and sustainability. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, wherever that may be. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So hello, folks. You might remember me from episode 2. I'm Michael Yanantuono, Lead Business Development Manager here at Thoughtworks. Support a range of customers from that liaise with us, ranging from small startups with a handful of employees right through to large enterprise organizations. And this can be with a range of different projects all around digital transformation. Alan, would you like to introduce yourself too?
Yeah, good morning. How you doing? My name's Alan Blockley. I am a pre-sale solutions architect lead here at Thoughtworks. I head up the Well-Architected practice as well, and I'm an AWS Ambassador.
Awesome. Thanks, Alan. So, folks, today I will be running through a few slides to set the scene, telling you who Thoughtworks are, a bit of information about what we do and what we're known for. And then Alan is going to walk us through the Well-Architected Framework with a big focus on cost optimization and sustainability. We'll talk about how you can implement Well-Architected into your architecture and go through some Q&A at the end for anybody that has questions. So, hello, we are Thoughtworks. We're a global software consultancy company. We've got many clients in Australia, and that ranges from small startups through to some of the country's largest brands. Some of the businesses that we work with, you can see their logos on the screen here: Atlassian, Domino's, NAB. But we also help a lot of smaller organizations too. We're an end-to-end digital partner combining strategy, software engineering, design, and organizational transformation. And we have 4 main areas where we support our clients that you can see on the screen here: customer experience, product, and design. Things like bringing your idea to market, designing your customer experience strategy and product design, enterprise modernization and cloud. So think modernization strategy and execution, migrating to the cloud, making the most of your investment in the cloud. And we're even able to help with operations in the cloud through digital application management and operations, or what we call DAMO. Data and AI. So here we help customers build robust data strategies and platforms, as well as cutting edge AI and Gen AI apps, and digital transformation and operations. Within DTO, we help our clients execute and build digital strategies. Over the last few decades, Thoughtworks has been at the forefront of technology innovations, and multiple pieces of literature have been authored by our colleagues. You can see a few examples on the screen here, but over 150 different books and pieces of literature have been authored. We aim to define the modern digital products are built by the most advanced organizations. And there's some more pieces of literature that will be released soon as well from some of my colleagues, so stay tuned. We've been in operation for over 3 decades and currently have over 10,000 employees across 51 offices in 18 different countries. This allows us to build the perfect team to support our clients, and we often utilize distributed teams across different regions of the world to really help bring in the right skill set at the right commercial price for our customers. As a leading digital transformation partner, we also really recognize the value and importance of collaborating with other trusted technology partners to make sure we bring our clients the very best solutions for their business challenges. And one of our largest partnerships is with AWS. We partner with AWS to build the capabilities required to succeed in today's digital landscape. We're actually a premier partner. It's the highest tier partner that AWS has. And we have multiple AWS competencies and accolades, a few of which you can see on the screen here. It's probably a really good time and point now for me to pass to my colleague, Alan. So Alan, as you would know, if you've been in our other WAFR Bytes sessions, recently was awarded the top AWS Ambassador for Australia and New Zealand, an accolade which he also received last year, so 2 years running. Hopefully make it a 3rd next year too, Alan. He has all the AWS competencies under the sun, everything that you can achieve. And is actually off to Vegas in a few days' time to present on stage at reInvent. So you've got an expert in the room here. He's going to dive a bit deeper into the next part of our presentation to talk about the Well-Architected Framework.
Thanks, Michael. So yeah, the well-architected framework. What we're going to do over the next sort of like half an hour is go through the aspects of the well-architected framework that pertain to cost and sustainability. What is the well-architected framework, though? Just to quickly define this, we've discussed this in the last 3 sessions, but just as a reminder here, we have 6 pillars of the well-architected framework, starting with operational excellence, which is where we talk all about the procedures and the processes around automating change, around responding to events, and then how you define standards for managing daily operations. The second pillar we've got is security, and that's where we look at the integrity of data, the security of data, but also how you manage permissions, and also how you look at how you detect security events as well as responding to them. Reliability is our third pillar that we talk about in the well-architected framework. And generally, we're looking at distributed system design, BCPs, backup policies, and ensuring that your workload is designed to withstand certain failures. Performance is the fourth pillar that the well-architected framework addresses. And this is where you start looking at things like instance types, sizes. Are they optimized for your workload? Are they performant? More so, how do you maintain that performance as the workload grows? Cost optimization, today's subject, is the fifth pillar, and this is where we start looking at the instance types, the sizes. Do they scale without overspending? How do you manage your daily operations from a spend perspective, and how do you get the best value out of the cloud? Sustainability is the sixth pillar, also talking about this one today, and this is where we start to look at the downstream impact on the environment based upon the architectures that are within your within your AWS account. Excuse me. So with that in mind, we move into cost optimization, and some of the things that I want to talk about today and make sure that you are understanding by the end of this is cost governance, scheduling, and long-term commitments of your AWS spend as well. So I mentioned cost governance. One of the first questions I ask customers about their AWS accounts when they sit with me in a well-architected framework review is AWS budgets. Do you have them? Have you looked at what an AWS budget is? And sometimes they'll go, yeah, we've got a budget. It's with finance and all that sort of stuff. But realistically, what we're actually looking for is a specific budget set up in the billing console in AWS. What this means is that you will then have a set cadence set up in AWS to tell you how you're spending your money each month. You will look at AWS budgets, you'll set them to roughly what you feel is right. If you've got a, $9,000 bill, maybe you'll set your budget to $10,000 or $9,500. You'll set up a cadence. You'll set up 25, 75%, 50%, whatever suits you. The cadence is configurable. And then as you hit those cadences, as you hit those thresholds, you'll be sent an email alert or to your favorite alerting service. Not only will it tell you that you've crossed that threshold, it will tell you what your forecast to be spending by the end of the month. Now, this is really useful because if you receive the 25% alert and it's only the third of the month, you might have a problem. High costs in terms of your account can also indicate security issues as well. And this is why it's important to understand your spending. It can also point out maybe there's been a problem in a deployment and something's scaled incorrectly. So it's very important to watch these costs as the month goes. And having a cadence like that is very important. But the other step around this is anomaly detection. Anomaly detection is something which will tell you if something has been resized or has gone out of scope of what would normally be normal. For example, case in point, I had this happen to me. You upgrade an RDS instance for a period of time whilst you do an upgrade, whilst you run a process, while you run a report, and you want to scale it back down again at the end of the week, but you forget about it. You forget to scale it down, and it's costing you 3 times, 4 times more than it should do for a longer period of time. Anomaly detection will alert you to the fact that that RDS instance has been scaled up and left on. And it will then tell you what the resource instance is. It will tell you how much it's costing you extra per day and what it's going to be forecast to cost you by the end of the month if you don't scale it back down. Very useful feature, especially if you have developer teams that regularly do this and sometimes forget to scale things back down again. The next step in cost governance that I regularly recommend is a tagging strategy. Now, I also recommend this is done with cost and usage reports as well, but ultimately tagging your workloads based upon cost centers is important, because then you can start to allocate and attribute cost to certain departments and understand further where the spending is, especially if you've got multiple products, which are then separated over multiple workloads. It's very important to set up a strategy here, whether it be for development stage, business units, or the application version even. It will be a very good indicator to know that version 2 actually runs cheaper than version 1. So there you go, big success in the new upgrade. And then lastly, when reviewing costs, Cost Explorer. It's really simple and easy to use. It's there in the console. A lot of people get stuck with the bill, and they're looking through the line items and they don't understand what all these ACUs and LCUs mean, and all these metrics. If you go to the billing console and click on Cost Explorer, it gives you a really nice interface to be able to review your costs over time, whether it be days or months. And so start to drill down service by service on where you're spending money. So that's cost governance. As we move into scheduling now, excuse me. So as we move into scheduling, the impact that scheduling of workloads can have on your environment is not to be underestimated. Where there is a production workload, there is potentially a development workload, a testing workload, or even a user acceptance testing workload. These environments need to be separated, which can sometimes create increased costs that you're not willing to foot all the time. I often find that customers will not want to have one of these environments, despite the fact that they are best practice, because of the cost. So with that in mind, by having a full-blown testing environment installed next to your production environment, but then scheduling it so it only launches 9 till 5, Monday to Friday, you can save 75% of the cost of that workload instead, based upon the hours that it's not being used. Similarly, you can do that with compute workloads, sometimes with RDS workloads as well. You can scale those down as well over the weekends. It depends on the service and how you achieve this, but scheduling is very important. If your workload is stateless, then moving it into an auto-scaling group or an auto-healing group, as we discussed in the last episode, could allow you to also make use of spot instances in non-production workloads as well, further reducing the computing costs. If it's a containerized workload, Fargate Spot can be used. If it is a EC2 workload, then Spot instances and Spot fleets are available. Fargate Spot tasks can save you up to something like 70% of the standard container cost, whereas 75% of the cost can be attributed, can be removed by scheduling as well. So the next big one, so long-term commitment. What does this mean, Michael?
I think from an AWS perspective, obviously looking at locking in savings plans, reserved instances, committing to hitting a certain level of usage or spend, and of course getting discounts over time for those commitments. Very very, very common way to save cost and popular amongst, almost every customer that we liaise with.
Exactly right. A lot of customers, when you say long-term commitment, they start to get concerned with what that means from a partnership level. I often say, no, you don't need to put a ring on it. But this is exactly what Michael said. Savings plans, making sure that you're locking in those long-term discounts and taking advantage of the fact that this workload is going to be here for a long time. If you're in business and you've been in business a while, you'll realize that certain elements of your architecture will stay the same for a long time. So there's multiple different long-term commitments available to you across your workload. I'm just going to talk about two today, two very specific ones. The first one is RDS. Everyone's got a database. Most of the time it's in RDS of some variety. So you're able to then purchase a reserved instance. Now, a reserved instance means that the database will run 24/7, but you'll be able to get a discount of around about 15 to 30%, depending on what sort of commitment you make. Commitments can be between 12 and 36 months, and you can either pay all of it upfront, or you can just pay nothing upfront and just commit to using that instance. And again, these different factors will depend on what then discount you get thereafter. Do be careful with reserved instances, though, that if you are looking to right size, they may not be suitable for you immediately. Make sure that your workload has been stable for a long period of time, about 3 months, before you make that decision. Or make sure you're certain that this workload will not change over the next 12 months. The other one that I will bring up is savings plans. Savings plans come in 3 different flavors. The first one is SageMaker. You can purchase a SageMaker savings plan to ensure that you do get some savings on those SageMaker endpoints. The next one is an EC2 savings plan, and this is specifically just for EC2 instances. It will lock you in to an instance family for the duration of the savings plan, so you can scale up and down inside of that family, but you won't be able to change outside of the family. The last savings plan that I want to talk about is my favorite. It's the most flexible as well. It's called the Compute Savings Plan. A Compute Savings Plan is applicable to EC2, Lambda, Fargate, EKS, ECS. Ultimately, all of that compute power, all that compute spend can be applied to a savings plan. It's like having a pool of money. You pay for it at the start of the month off your bill. You're committed to an hourly rate per month. And as you use compute, it will come out of that pool first. Once you've depleted that pool of money that you've put aside, you will then go into on-demand rates. However, the savings available in that commitment that you make is between 15 to 30%, again, depending on what you commit to. It has similar constraints such as 12 to 36 months, all upfront, no upfront, and partial. Partial upfront basically means 50% of the cost upfront, and the rest of it comes month by month. The cool thing about savings plans is that you can renew them regularly enough to optimize them, say twice a year, 4 times a year, depending on your organizational size and the amount of change that goes on. So if you're in a state of growth and you bought your savings plans 3 months ago, you could then buy a second savings plan to consume the next bit of growth to make sure that you get the maximum savings and the maximum cost optimization. So that's long-term commitment. Top tip, make sure that you have a savings plan expiry alert as well set up, just to ensure that when the savings plan is finished, you are not hit with a big bill. Bill shock is real. And customers, I've had a couple of times, my costs have gone up 20 to 30% in the last 2 months, and I don't know why, because your savings plan's expired and you didn't know. So have that alert set up as well. Moving on to our next pillar, sustainability. Now, some people wonder why we've put these 2 pillars together. And at this point, I'm going to review the sustainability pillar and the why behind the sustainability pillar. But first, we've got to have a quote from Werner Vogels, because we've had one of the last 3 episodes, so here's another quote. This was Werner Vogels last year at reInvent during his keynote. Sustainability is a byproduct of cost optimization. This was very stunning to hear to start with, but then the world understood where he was going with this. Werner Vogels is the author, the inventor, for want of a better word, of a framework called the Frugal Architect. So what is the Frugal Architect? It's a framework or a set of laws, for want of a better word, that were introduced by Werner to focus on cost-aware, sustainable modern architectures. It comprises of 7 foundational laws that guide architects to help design efficient systems. By being cost-aware, you are then more sustainable long-term. If you're interested in looking further into the Frugal Architect, I do recommend a read. The link is on the bottom there at the moment, thefrugalarchitect.com. The 7 laws include concepts such as making cost a non-functional requirement. And to be honest, that's a big one. A lot of companies don't realize that cost is so big or can be so impactful on their product until after they've started their go-to-market strategy and they realize that the costs are actually higher than they expected. So understanding cost in your design requirements is very important. I'll let you read the other 6 laws for yourself on the frugalarchitect.com. So sustainability. I have 3 top tips for sustainability. And ultimately, to explain sustainability in the best way and its connection to cost optimization, think about doing less with more. Ultimately, the definition of frugality. Excuse me. The first tip that I have for you is AWS Graviton. Graviton is a custom silicon chip that has been designed by Amazon for AWS to bring more power to the data center whilst using less power, doing more with less. Ultimately, the Graviton chipset will use 20% less power from the grid. It will provide you more power and throughput depending on your workload and use case. Sometimes it is actually a better alternative to the other chipsets available. It's been benchmarked at approximately 4% better in some use cases, so it's always worth looking at. Bear in mind, this is an ARM chipset, so it's only it does have certain caveats. Can't be used on a Windows workload at the moment, for example. But if you've got a standard open source Linux stack or similar, you can take part in Graviton. Selecting Graviton for at Lambda, at Fargate, at EC2. Graviton's also built into managed services as well, such as Elasticache, RDS, Aurora. And at this point, you start to realize that Graviton isn't just a CPU. It's like the oil in your car. By changing the oil in your car to something that's more efficient, you start to gain more kilometers per tank, and you start to do better for the environment. Graviton is everywhere. If you've got the option to go to Graviton, try it, especially in managed services like RDS. How do you recognize a Graviton chipset on AWS? Good question. Under RDS, you'll see it denoted as something like R8G. After the number, you'll have the G. Similar in EC2. After the number, you'll have a G. With some other services, it won't be called Graviton or G. It may just say ARM, ARM. And anything that uses ARM inside of AWS now generally uses Graviton as well. My second tip is region selection. Not all regions are made equal. I'm making that my catchphrase. Consider the region that you are deploying your workload to, because at the end of the day, different geographical areas have different ways of acquiring power. Amazon certainly do try and put in renewable energy sources close to data centers, but some regions are already covered by environmental attributes such as renewable energy credits or guarantees of origin. This effectively means that it's net neutral. Those regions are Oregon in the US, Frankfurt in Europe, Canada, and Ireland. Those 4 regions will give you the best results as far as sustainability is concerned. And then my last tip for sustainability is having a data strategy. And this is important because at the end of the day, when we all have databases, a lot of times, especially if they're relational databases, they run off heavy engines. Think Microsoft SQL, think MySQL, PostgreSQL. All of these different database systems have an engine that runs in the background 24/7. Even when there's no transactions, you're still running a heavy RDS instance to wait for the transactions to come through. And if you have either a peaky workload or something which has a pattern, such as 9 till 5, then you've got a lot of wastage in terms of the compute power that's sat there idle, taking up power from the grid and then spitting out carbon emissions. It's all about reducing carbon emissions at the end of the day. So what can we do to improve our data strategy to reduce our carbon emissions? Remove latent data from the relational database first. Anything like transaction logs that actually aren't read, anything that's used for what if referencing later. Remove binary large objects from databases as well. All of these pieces of information are indexed and queried each time that you run a query and each time you ask for an index, which then takes up more power, which then makes your instance busier, which means you need a bigger instance type, and all of a sudden you're in this spiral. So starting to streamline your database to just have not only the items I already mentioned, but also active data only. So if you can archive data as well, great. Put that archive data in S3 instead, or a RESTful location. Query it with serverless utilities like Amazon Athena. And don't forget, services like Athena have a programmatic interface that you could also leverage as part of your product to then query that archive data later. So it's not lost and it's not out of your product. It's just in a different location and just needs to be queried slightly different. Think about data lakes. Data lakes are obviously very, very useful. Having the different connecting types off in different areas means that you've got your RESTful data here, your active data here, and you've got processes to manage that data as well. But think about things like a data lake. So how do we implement well-architected best practices into our businesses? It's a great question. I have customers ask me this every day. I give them the same advice every day as well. Design with well-architected in mind. The well-architected framework should be treated as a foundation, as a concrete slab under a house. Then once you've built your foundation, your foundational architecture, you can then build your product on top of that. No matter if it's a change or a brand new feature or a brand new project, think well-architected first. Build a strategy of remediation, though, if you've got an existing architecture that you're trying to change. Prioritize. Don't try and fix everything at once because that will really cause you some long-term problems later. At the end of the day, you'll need to discuss and think about certain trade-offs between workloads and between features as well. So you might find that there's conflict between different pillars or even different best practices. That's why it's important to prioritize and not do everything at once. Keep it simple. A well-architected environment doesn't have to be complex or expensive. Don't boil the ocean is the one thing I keep getting told. Review your architecture every 12 months. People happen. Problems happen, mistakes happen. It's always worth reviewing and remediating because things can change over a year. Standards change as well. Last year's best practice could be this year's security issue. So check what those best practices are and how they've changed. Treat it like a service for your car. At the end of the day, if you would service your car every year, why would you not service the thing that makes you the most money? Your product. If you're unsure with how to approach the well-architected framework or review or the remediations, engage with a well-architected partner. And with that in mind, I'm going to hand over to Michael, who can talk more about how Thoughtworks works with customers with the well-architected framework and reviews.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alan. I'm sure that we could talk about cost optimization and sustainability for hours, but you've touched on heaps of really good points there, over the last 30 minutes. And I'm sure lots of ways, people watching from home can jump in and look to optimize costs straight away or be more sustainable. But how can we help you at Thoughtworks with these reviews? Well, we do loads and loads of these each and every year. We've really made and defined our own process over the last half a decade to make it frictionless and easy for customers of ours to go through and get a good snapshot of their environment and how they line up to the well-architected framework. The way we do this is through a 3-hour conversational review. And there's no prep work or homework required. The conversation is guided by Alan and his team, and it pivots and twists and turns based on your unique landscape and what you have in your AWS footprint. The only thing that we ask is that you provide a copy of a recent AWS bill, which is very handy for us to get an idea of what services you utilize the most and get a head start on cost optimization, and any architectural diagrams if you have them. But very, very easy, conversational. You just need to be open and tell us about the environment, and we can provide lots of recommendations and input on how you line up to the well-architected framework. Post this 3-hour review, we author a detailed remediation report for you. This is typically shared within 2 to 5 business days. We split it into 3 sections: an executive summary containing our main handful of recommendations aimed at less technical folk, maybe stakeholders in the business; a matrix breakdown of how many high or medium risks are in the environment and how many information pieces we've found numbered against the pillar, as you see in the image on the screen here. And then a detailed technical report that can be 10 to 50 pages long, depending on your environment size, where we break down each of these individual high or medium risks or info pieces and share a paragraph of information about them. So why should you do a review with us, though, at Thoughtworks? Well, over the last couple of years, we've delivered, I had to update this slide this morning, over 320 well-architected framework reviews. I think we've had 6 alone in the last week, Alan. So Alan and his team have been quite busy. We've helped customers remediate over 8,200 high-risk items in projects post these reviews. And our average CSAT score is 4.9 out of 5. So lots of really positive customer feedback shared with us and our experts about the reviews that we've helped clients through. If you would like to jump in and book a consult, please use the QR code on the screen here. That will allow myself or one of my colleagues to reach out and book a 30-minute meeting with you so that we can run through your business and your environment and lock in a time to sit down with Alan and his team and do a review. Now, folks, does anybody have any questions? We've got some Q&A. If anybody has any questions, you are welcome to post them in the chat. I think we'll wait a moment for some to come in, but I know, Alan, very, very common question that I get asked by many clients is, around storage. Really probably one that comes up the most is how can I make my usage of S3 cheaper? So maybe if you've got any input or ideas there, Alan.
That's a fair comment, because I just advised everyone to shift their stuff out of RDS and into S3. So how would then we make that cheaper, especially if you've got terabytes and terabytes upon data? S3 does have multiple layers and tiers of pricing. You can use things like lifecycle policies or even intelligent tiering to basically send those inactive files that aren't being used as much to different statuses of inactivity, which then can half your storage costs each time that you go down a different level, even to the point of going to Glacier instead. Glacier is just another form of S3, which will ultimately then be much cheaper to store archived data.
Awesome. I mean, there's quite a few different methods there, isn't there? But some great recommendations. And, if you would like to know more about how to make your storage cheaper, you are absolutely welcome to reach out to Alan or I and get booked in for a well-architected framework review where we can talk through all of the unique options specifically for your business. Cool. Well, we haven't had any more questions come in. Folks, thank you so much for joining us today. And if you've been at any of our other 3 sessions, thank you for joining those too. You've got myself and Alan's email addresses on the screen here. Please reach out to us if you have any questions or would like to book a review, or if you have any feedback about the webinar today. This is the end of our WAFR Bytes. This is 4 of 4. We've really loved going through all of these. Watch this space. We will be having a bunch of different webinars that we market out to everybody next year on a range of different topics. If there's anything that you'd like to hear more about, let us know. We'd love to get some input from the people watching from home as to what they'd like to hear about in these webinars too. Alan, anything to wrap us up before we end today?
Just a big thank you to yourself for hosting today, and for your team for supporting this the last 4 weeks. It's been a really good 4 weeks of webinars, and so I hope to see more of them happen next year.
Awesome. Thank you.
No worries. See you next year. Bye.